Hello and welcome. My name is Gabrielle Celeste.
Hello, it's Nicole here, Nicole Christine.
And welcome to this.
And
Oh,
yeah. And my name is Annamarie Green.
And we have a guest.
We have a very special guest because today is Annamarie's birthday.
Yay! I'm 28, y'all. Crawling towards 30. Thank you.
Crawl very slowly.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm in the middle of my Saturn return, so it's I'm doing my thing.
I feel like you're really going to have a good one, though. We've talked about this. I was like, you're so on path that it's just going to be beautiful for you.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I feel like my Saturn return was really the 4 or 5 years before my actual Saturn return. Like, so many different levels of my life were just like torn limb from limb to get to where I am now. So,
yeah, I mean, I've seen your chart many times, and it's equally challenging as it is blessed. But I also believe that's very much a part and connected to the work that you're doing. And I really love for this episode because I'm kind of the bystander on this one, and I'm learning from you both because this is your guys' shit and your area and expertise. And we're talking about the fine line between spirituality and mental health. So I can't wait. I can't wait for you guys to just dig deep.
Oh yeah, I don't even know where to start.
It's
like it's a heavy topic. Yeah. Okay, so before we even jump in, Annamarie Green, besides having some sweet dance moves that you just recently showed off on Instagram, tell us about you. You know, we've been so lucky lately to have so many guests and friends and just really cool people, and everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different area of expertise. Everybody is just so different and unique and beautiful. So tell us about you and how you got here and what you do.
Well, how I got here is a very roundabout way. I always tell Gabby, I joke around, I was like, everything in my life that has been like a major move or decision on my part or like influence on me, at first I'm like, absolutely not, never in a million years am I gonna do that, like pshaw. Like I remember when I first started watching Nikki Novo's stuff, I was like, I would see her talk about Soul Teacher, and I was like, I'm never taking that class because I don't want to read other people. I'm not meant for that stuff. Like, I'm just interested. I'm just spiritual adjacent.
Right.
I just want to know about stuff for myself. And last year, my 27th birthday, or after my 27th birthday, I was like, I don't know why, but I just feel like I'm supposed to take this. And so I did with no expectations. And it turned out that I was very gifted in the work. And I loved it, and it felt like a part of my soul had just like awakened. And it really gave me a lot of support. Like I just formed these really great bonds, which has helped me to build the confidence to where I am now. So now I am a life and business intuitive, and what that really means is, my work serves people in a variety of ways, but ultimately my goal is for you to see what beauty and light your soul is, so that you can create whatever it is that you are drawn to on this earth, to make life a little bit more, not even a little bit, easier and more fun. And whether that's healing from traumas, whether that's relieving physical pain, whether that's improving your relationships, or helping your kids out, my goal is to just make life easier. And then also business. I have formed these really cool, energetic understandings of how businesses operate, and I'm really able to help people create their vision and then birth it. I don't consider myself a business coach, but I consider myself a business intuitive, which is a really interesting place to be. My top services are healings, and then I also do parental clarity readings, which are super great, and they really stemmed from me talking to a lot of different parents, and also being a mom myself, and so many of us being like, I just want my child to be the happiest, healthiest, most them that they can be, and how can I do that without like my shit getting in the way? Or, you know, I don't know what I'm like. Most of us are parents for the first time. Some people have multiples, but even and then we're still experiencing things for the first time because each child is so different. And so many of us are just like grasping for straws that then we're unable to be present for our kids. And that reading is really to help you to be present and to help you have a path. I connect with the child, with your child's soul. And a lot of times it's their anxiety is what a lot of parents are coming to me because their kids are feeling really anxious. And then I'm getting to what is the root cause? Where does it stem from? What do they need? And then you end up leaving with a like action plan. So my readings are very, you get the reading, you get the understanding, the root cause, and then you have these tangible steps to overcome whatever it is, the obstacle, the wound, and so forth. And outside of the energetic space, which I freaking love, I love, like, it's just, I know that it's my soul's calling because it's not this lust thing where I'm just excited for a little bit. I truly love what I do. I bake. I would consider myself a semi-professional baker. Scarlett, my daughter, tells everybody, she no longer tells them that I'm a feelings doctor. She says, my mom's a baker without a bakery. And, and she's like, she can make you whatever you want. She offers my services, my baked
What's your specialty?
goods. Chocolate chip cookies, vegan and non-vegan, and carrot cake. I make the best carrot cake you will ever have in your entire life. And I say that humbly. I say that humbly.
We have a baker in the family.
Yes.
And I would love to taste test both of them.
Yes, absolutely.
Side by side, blind taste test. So I don't know whose is whose. Because I think he would probably say
that his is the best.
Yeah, because I mean, he's pretty good. He has never baked or cooked anything that we didn't like.
That's fair. I have always felt drawn to baking. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I will make you whatever you want. I love making things from scratch, figuring things out. I've started to take some herbology classes. So I've started to figure out how I can integrate some healing stuff in my desserts. And then I just consider myself a mover. Like, I love moving my body. I love dancing, spending time with my friends and family and out in nature. I'm an earth girl. Gabby and I will talk about it all the time. Like, you can find me barefoot outside because I love the earth. Ever since I was little.
I think you should do more dancing.
My siblings would disagree. My 16-year-old sister was horrified. She laughed. She was just like, why are you so tense? She was like, you need to loosen up. And I was like, I am loose. I was like,
I thought you were loose. Yeah.
My siblings are very like too cool for school. Like, they've got a little bit more, they would consider themselves having more swagger than me. And honestly, I would agree with them. I don't know if I think too much or whatever, but like, they were like, what are you doing? And I was like,
having fun.
Yeah.
Living your life.
Yeah. I was like, please go somewhere else. Stop watching me. Just go.
But I do love to having a blast. Yeah. You should do more. You would probably, right? That's how people are drawing audiences in.
Yeah.
Dancing. Isn't that how TikTok started?
Yes. The trending dances. Yeah. Yes. And I've always wanted friends who would be like, let's do a trending dance together. But none of my friends like that are physically around me are like, yeah. They're like, nah, only if it's your birthday or like a special occasion, we'll do it for you.
But you don't need them to be around you as you guys.
That's true.
You guys figured out.
Yes. Angel and I figured that out, and I was pretty happy.
So I have a question going back to the parental clarity reading.
Yes.
So you said you'll read for the parents and then you'll read the child's energy. And I don't know where I heard, and so you guys can educate me or, you know, help me figure it out. But I thought I had heard somewhere that you can't or shouldn't read the energy or soul of somebody who's under the age of 18. And maybe it was unless you have their parents' permission, which I guess if the parents are coming to you, then you have it. But did I hear that wrong, or am I making that up?
I always heard that it was if you have the parents' permission, then it's okay. But maybe you heard something different, Gabby.
Yeah, I was always instructed by my mentors to not give a reading to a child until they're 12. at least,
Mm.
and obviously with parental consent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also, it's kind of a fine line. Like, okay, like if you have a child that's under that age and you want to have their birth chart read,
Mm-hmm.
it was always advised to just allow them to have that experience for themselves upon the age of 12. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's interesting about these readings is it's not necessarily like what you would consider like a clarity reading where you're going into the person's chakra. Essentially, I call their energy forward and I like collect their anxious energy and separate it from them, or like whatever the energy is. So say you have a child who's like, they're hitting people, they're very, very aggressive, they're, whatever. It has its own energetic coding, if you will. And I gather it and I separate it from their soul. And I read essentially that issue, that feeling, and where it's rooted from. And it's interesting because I haven't had any blocks with reading it, but I do have the parent's consent, and a lot of times the parent is coming with them in the reading, like energetically. So I always feel that it's okay. But I will not just go into a child's energy. And if they are over, if they're over the age of like 10, I usually have the parent like ask them if it's okay. But like 5 and 6 year olds, as long as the parent is okay with it, then I'm okay with it.
And so let's jump back because you said that your mom, or sorry, not your mom, your daughter says my mom's not a feelings doctor anymore. She's a baker without a bakery. So
Yes.
tell everybody what you were doing
Oh yeah.
before.
Oh my gosh, it's so crazy because I really was still doing this a month and a half ago. I just stopped. But I was a clinical therapist in the state of Michigan, and I specifically worked with a lot of people with borderline personality disorder, but also anxiety and depression. But anxiety is definitely like my niche. So it doesn't matter if it's severe and you have panic attacks every single day for the last decade. If we work together, we are going to be great or straight in like 3 months.
Right.
So yeah, I've done that since 2020 is when I became a therapist.
And what is your credential specifically?
I have a master's in social work. So yes.
So you're LCSW?
LMSW in the state of Michigan, yeah.
What does that stand for?
Licensed Mastered Social Worker. So it's like the LCSW, but it's just what they call it in Michigan. Because you know how states can't have the same credentialing. That would be insane.
Yeah, well, why do we want uniformity and continuity?
Yeah. Why would we want people to be able to choose their therapist no matter where they are at in the world? Why that would be
it's ridiculous to think that.
Chaos. Yeah, of course.
God forbid. Okay, so with that, and one of the things that we've spoken about, even just like me and my husband, who's like not into the spiritual stuff, and
yet.
We'll see. That's we're a long ways from that. and I've had these conversations before with Gabrielle, and the idea comes up a lot, or the topic of, because here's what my husband says. So here's kind of how we got on the subject. So my husband's idea, or his thought, is that people are going to seek spiritual guidance, for example, like via mediumship, a psychic, an intuitive, whatever it is, before they're willing to commit to doing the healing in therapy, because therapy is going to take longer. It's going to be more difficult versus going and getting a reading and hearing. His thing is like, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to tell you something to give you hope, right? Like the people that are giving the readings want people to feel better when they leave than they felt when they came to see them, which is the same in therapy, right? We want our clients to feel better when they leave our office or leave our appointments. And I've noticed in just diving into the work a little bit, I'm still very new, but I don't disagree. I don't disagree. And I think that I've seen a lot of people that are trying to bypass the deep work
Mm-hmm.
And not saying that this isn't also deep work, because I mean, there's so much healing and work in this that I
Yeah.
never imagined. But I do see a lot of bypassing of therapy because there's a lot of validation that is given in readings.
Yeah.
And in therapy, there's sometimes a lot of challenging that is done. So, what have you kind of noticed? What have been your thoughts on that? Because we spoke a little briefly about it.
Yeah. So I agree. I agree in seeing it, because I have friends and stuff who would never come to me as a therapist, but also probably would never. Well, they have come to me maybe once for like an energy type of for energy work. And what I will say is that a lot of times people think that getting an energetic reading is like the easy way out. Like, here, it's done for me. Like, here's and and maybe for some practitioners that's true, right? I'm sure that there are people out there, like there are therapists out there, like you can just find somebody in every single field that does what you're looking for. So to me, you could find a therapist who would tell you exactly what you want to hear all of the time and would just be comfy and cozy. I have never been one of those therapists, nor am I one of those readers. I show up with so much love and support, and like, you feel safe, but I am always gonna, whatever comes through, I set the intention, what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, every single time. And it's never like the stuff always comes up, the past life stuff, or like the deep stuff that we don't want to face. And I was like that as a therapist too. Like, we got down to the root within the first month, and you were facing the things that you have maybe avoided facing. And so my trajectory was either I had clients who would leave really, really early, or I had clients who were like, okay, and then they were good. And like, after like 3 months, we didn't really need to work together anymore. And that's how I like to work. Like, I disagree with the therapy industry that like you should have to be in therapy for 2 to 3 years to get some of your symptoms relieved. To me, that's unethical, because you don't know that someone's even going to be able to afford therapy for 2 to 3 years, or if they're going to be in this space to do this for 2 or 3 years. And then that's 2 or 3 years of them suffering to move like the needle a little bit. And that's just never been my vibe.
You bring up an interesting point with the affordability. So that could be another argument. That could be another argument for why somebody would say, okay, well, let me go do this like energetic healing and go do this like spiritual guidance and spiritual coaching, because you know, maybe it's going to cost me, I don't know, $300 for 90 minutes or whatever it is. But I only need to do it once, maybe twice. And if somebody doesn't have good insurance, or if the therapist doesn't take the insurance, then okay, well, now I need to spend, I don't know, $150 every week, or every time I have an appointment, and I'm going to need several appointments. So I could also see that being the argument of like, I just can't afford therapy, but I can afford this because it's going to be less and maybe more work.
And see, I guess I don't see it as a bad thing. I think, because to me, this energetic work it feels like it's going to just blend with therapy over time. Like, it's just going to be a segment of therapy. Like, you can have CBT, or you can CBT, or like there's hypnotherapy, or like, to me, it's just going to be blended. And I don't think that that's a negative thing, because I think it's all about the practitioner, because you can have a really great therapist who you can have really great results with, or you could have a really crappy one. And the same thing happens in the energetic field. You know, like, you can have someone who just does predictions and is like predicting, but isn't giving you these tangible steps. And I think that that's what's powerful about therapists, especially who go into this work like you and I, who we've made treatment plans and we've done like the different theories like in practice. And so when we're receiving things, like, I receive steps very, very clearly, very, very tangibly, and I'm like, here's how you do it, this is how it can happen. And then I can also understand it on a psychological, scientific level, because I've already been in this work. So I really think that it just, depends on who you're going to. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh yeah, one is better than the other, because it's just not true. Like, to me, they are equally as strong, but it's really going to be about the practitioner that you go to.
Right. So, yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Gabs.
Oh, I want to circle back, and I want you to, obviously ask Nichole first, but I'm really curious at some point to cover when you found the link between this therapy work and the spiritual component, because it's inherently there. And I think we can all agree on that. But what were you going to say, Nichole?
I was going to ask, you mentioned that you work with primarily anxiety, and I also primarily work with anxiety. And I think that's because there's just so many people that are experiencing it. And you also mentioned borderline personality disorder, which falls under personality disorders, which I tend to shy away from because it's just a little more challenging, and I am not always up for the challenge. And I'm wondering what you've seen in the work, because I know sometimes when people come in, right, we see anxiety, we see depression, sadness, grief, we see all of that. I think there's a big piece of the maybe personality disorders that we haven't touched on. And so being that you're more familiar with it than I am, I'm wondering what you can speak to.
So, the anxiety and depression, yes, like they're very easy to identify. They happen at different length or different depths. I really didn't start to make the energetic connection with stuff. I really, in the last year I have, because that's when I started to dive deep into this work. But as I look back, I was always using a level of my intuition when treating and interacting with patients. It just, as I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why we got to the root so quickly. I already kind of knew what was happening. But one of the big things that I have learned is that there is always this energetic component. And I started to become a therapist in 2020. The pandemic was like in full swing. So everyone was having like these extreme symptoms. The thing about, so I'm going to try to tackle these one thing at a time. Every single mental health condition that we have out there has an energetic like coding. Think of it as like, how DNA has the individual strands that wrap around the helix. Like, it has its own energetic coding, and it's very different for each person. It has its own like, not a single one is like the same when you really like look at it. And part of that is just like how we identify it. So like anxiety is a very physical response. It's not all bad. And actually, like, once, what it is it's just trying to communicate with you. So once you figure out what it's trying to communicate, the root cause, you can actually use it to manifest. You can use it to do all these things in life that actually make life better. Depression is anger that has been unprocessed, and it can be anger that's unprocessed from this life or from that's passed along generation to generation. So when you have like a mom who's experiences extreme depression, and then you have a daughter who experiences extreme depression, part of the daughter's depression is the unprocessed anger from the mom, or maybe that mom had, the grandmother was traumatized in some way, and it's this anger that has sat and festered, and it's been passed down and passed down and passed down. And with each generation, the more that it's unexpressed, the more intense the depression gets. And it's because the anger is a very potent emotion. It's very action driven. When we feel it, our bodies need to like move. Something needs to be done. And that's because anger is asking us like, hey, there's a boundary that's been crossed. And so we need to put some type of boundary in so that we're not jeopardized again, so that we're protected. But the less that we do that, and the more we resist anger, it comes out some way. And depression is anger coming out, but towards yourself. You're punishing yourself. You have to like, because it's so strong, you have to numb it out. You have to like completely disconnect from yourself in order to let go, or in order to not acknowledge the anger. Borderline personality disorder and personality disorders in general are a very interesting, energetic topic, because you have some that are contracted in, and then you have some that are, I call them generational curses, because essentially some type of trauma happened. It could be like 5, 10 generations back, But whatever happened to that person, that first ancestor, they didn't process it. So upon them passing, they made this promise, like, this will never happen to my daughters or my granddaughters or the women in my line again. And so that unprocessed wound gets stored energetically in the DNA of the lineage. And it's passed down and passed down and passed down. And maybe not everyone in the family has a personality disorder, but at one point, somebody down the line who's carrying this wound, it gets triggered. And so it comes out as a survival response. Most personality disorders, such as like narcissism or borderline, people are not born having. They are something that is developed as a way to survive. And so narcissists, and for example, are where the person gets stuck in the ego development phase of like, me, 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 me. This entire world revolves around me. Everything is about me. Think about like how your 4 or 5-year-old is like, of course everything's about me. And like, I'm going to have these temper tantrums and like, everyone's being so mean to me just because you said no, but that's their age appropriate response.
Right.
But someone just getting stuck there, and as a way to survive. And it could happen for a variety of reasons. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think, right, they can get stuck there because of maybe some kind of trauma that they either witnessed or experienced. Right. And then what do we know about trauma? Like, trauma interferes with the development of the brain. So you could chronologically be 15, but maybe developmentally you're still 5 years old because of whatever you experienced.
And sorry, I was just going to say, borderline energetically is really the person completely detached from their soul, essentially. And so they're completely ungrounded. And so what's happening is like they're instead attaching their energy to people out there. And so the minute that person that they've attached themselves to starts to feel angry, starts to feel sad, starts to feel something that they have decided is unsafe, anything that isn't happiness or, I need like attentiveness, it immediately, like, they try to sever it. They have lots of cords attached to them. They have lots of things attached to them. Borderlines have a very open energy because they need, like, they're, think of it as like, they feel like they need others' energy to survive because they had to detach from their own so early on in order to protect it. And there's lots of other, there's not lots, but there's other things that can show up as to energetically what's happening as to why a borderline personality develops.
Gabs, you feel like you got your question answered?
Sorry.
No, just because I had a question, but I wanted to make sure that you felt.
No, totally. Okay. I'm so captivated by the whole past lives and what we've contracted to have in this lifetime, but I know we're going to cover it. What were you going to say, Nichole?
No, yeah, that was going to be my next question, but I just kind of wanted to segue real quick back to, like, you were talking about the link between anger and depression. And so I've noticed, like, depression is anger, but anger is depression. And that's something that and it's something that I'm noticing more and trying to explain more, especially as I work with more males, where, there's a lot of misdiagnosing in males, especially where they're being underdiagnosed with depression, and instead they're getting slapped with the label of anger issues, and trying to explain to them why and where that comes from. And because society says it's not okay to be sad if you're a boy, stop crying, all those things. And so what is it okay to be? Well, it's okay to be aggressive and angry. And so as I've kind of like pointed that out, it's like you see the little connection starting to take place, and they're like, oh, like that totally makes sense.
And they have a really hard time getting out of it. Like, I find that my male clients are the ones who will circle back into depression just much more regularly. And part of that is because they've been taught, or they're uncomfortable with feeling sad. Sadness as an energy, as an emotion, it actually is our soul asking for community. It's trying to adapt to the changes of what we're experiencing on earth, and it's asking for community. That's why when we're sad and we're crying, it triggers a human response for somebody to come and hug, to console, to gather around that person. And that's what we really miss out on. People think like, oh, you're sad, just, you'll feel better. It's fine. But really it's just our soul asking to surround ourselves with other people. And because men resist it, they end up just in these cycles of like, just anger, and that's it.
And even if we talk about something like borderline personality disorder, I would say that they might often get labeled as attention seeking. Yes. Right? You're just seeking. You're just, oh my God, there's such an attention seeker, and trying to reframe that as, well, what if we saw it as connection seeking and not attention seeking, and making that little shift. And I've had that discussion with parents. Oh, and my kid's just seeking attention. Okay. What if your kids are actually seeking connection, and that's the only way that they can do it? And when you start seeing it that way, it actually helps too. And so I think with borderline personality disorder, that's what it is. It's that connection that they're longing for, not the attention, but they don't know how to ask for the connection appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And part of it is, the attention seeking, it's how they've had to adapt to their surroundings, and as well as like, think about, going through life not truly knowing what you desire, not truly knowing yourself, just being so like floating. Like, think of a balloon just like floating, kind of going this way, kind of going that way, but never really knowing where they came from, where they belong. And that's a lot of times what I see with borderline is like, they don't know what they truly desire because they've just adapted to whatever everyone else wants. It's people pleasing to such an extreme that it has severed your physical body and your soul, and your mind. They're three different compartments. They don't function together anymore.
And so one of the things that we spoke about that kind of prompted for you to come on was, you said something about how people contract to have these different disorders, whatever it is, whether it's a personality disorder or just a, mental health disorder. And I thought that was really interesting. So can you tell us a little more about that piece? Because I hadn't heard that. And I was like, oh, that's a very interesting way of looking at mental health.
Yeah. And there are some mental health disorders that are more common to be contracted than others. So schizophrenia is one of those ones that is very frequently contracted in. And the reason that the reason they contracted in it is different, but essentially it's to help the soul evolve in some way. And I really started to see this when I was started to integrate my, like, what I was, my knowledge as a therapist with my readings. And there were some, let's take example on a very, or not example, let's take anxiety on a very basic example. One of the things that I frequently see is like, a child, for example, might contract anxiety very early on in their life to deal with, that is a result of a past life. That is a result of a past life issue coming up and to be solved in the first half of their life or whatever it is. But the contracts, like, it's not that it can't be rewritten. Like, having something contracted in doesn't mean you're stuck with it, but it does require much more energetic intervention. So rewriting contracts is something that can be done, but it's usually like shamans can do it, like master healers can do it, and they can show you how. But it also gives you insight. So sorry, go ahead, Gabby.
No, that just sounds. I please finish your thoughts. You're like, shamans can rewrite that contract. Yes. I'm fascinated.
At least this is, so I have a friend who's a master healer, and she has been trained by shamans. I don't know if all shamans do it because I have not worked like with a ton of shamans. But I am on my way of like getting certified in various levels of healings. And so I feel like eventually I will be taking some form of shaman classes. But one of the things that I learned in my most recent medical intuitive class that I took was that you can rewrite stories. You can rewrite contracts. You can rewrite entire like bloodline stories, essentially like your lineage, and clear all of it. And it just requires a certain level of a practitioner. It's not something that just like anyone can do on their own. A lot of times you have to be working, or at least I would recommend you work with somebody, because you have to go to these higher chakras. So above chakra 13, you have to go like, I think it's like 46 or 57 or something like that. It's very, very high. And it basically feels like you're astral projecting. It's wild.
Sign me up.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And because one of the things that I discovered about myself, it's not a mental health contract, but I contracted in my epilepsy. And through the work that I like did, and what I discovered was that it's actually this gift. And although I could get rid of it, I need it for certain things here on earth. So I actually have just learned how to control it since doing that course and stuff. So, and it's similar with mental health stuff, but and I will say I have not cleared somebody's contract of mental health stuff at this point in time. But it is something that I have discovered.
I had heard once that, sorry, go ahead. There's like a lag.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm so interested about this because I just did a healing on someone who is schizophrenic, and I connected with a family member after the fact, and they had mentioned that they had immediately noticed a turn for the better, and I was seeing that it was a past life thing. So
yes.
That's so interesting to me.
Yeah. And there's even a difference between like contracted to have this or like past life wounding that is tasked with being healed in this lifetime. And I see it all the time with kids. Like one of the most common things I see with kids who haven't experienced like intense traumas during this life is that if they have like really bad anxiety and they're just like, they need to control things, they're having all these behavioral issues, and you're kind of just like, as a parent, you're like, I'm doing everything I can. I don't know why they're feeling this. I don't know why they're behaving this way, feeling this way. Like, I can't get them to be to experience happiness. Like, they're just always stressed. They're always like on edge. It's usually a past life. I would say like 9 out of 10 times. And I've done at least 20 of these readings in the last couple of months. And it's always past life. It's just like, it's wild.
It's like my poor child. He's so anxious, but I think it's because I'm so anxious.
That can
My
be
husband's
true.
always like, well, look at yourself. So
yeah. And as moms, like we don't realize it, and so many of us are like courted to our children, both intentionally and unintentionally.
They're literally.
Oh, well, yeah. Yes. They're literally, there's a literal
from
cord.
Belly button to belly button. Like I tell him all the time, we were attached at our belly buttons all the time. So really funny story. When my son was a baby, he would always put his hand in my shirt. Like that was the way he would kind of like ground. And he still tries to do it now. And I tell him like,
and you're
stop
like,
it.
You're too old.
So now he puts his hand like in his shirt, but he was a baby. He had to have been under 2. I don't remember the exact age. But he put his hand under my shirt and he went down, 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 down. He was like so wiggly. He was super restless. He stuck his little finger in my belly button. He popped it in and he just stopped moving and fell asleep. And I was like, what? Like he had to like plug back into me, and then he was fine after that.
Oh my gosh. That's wild. Yeah. I tell one of the things I tell moms most frequently, because during the reading and after the reading, is you really want to pay attention to what was the spiritual awakening, what dark moment of the souls did you experience during your pregnancy? What fears did you have to come to terms with? What promises did you make to yourself, to your future child? And like, because a lot of times when we make promises as like an aspiring parent, it's out of a place of anger. It's out of a place of fear. It's out of a place of a wound that we are still like white knuckling, holding on to as this thing. And so a lot of times that actually cords our kids to those fears, to those wounds, and also intensifies the cord to us is through this wound. So then it's like they're picking up on they're not just picking up this anxiety. They are like, you promised yourself you weren't going to be this way, or your kids were going to be successful, or they weren't going to be, and their soul is now being influenced by that. Like we think that it's just a promise we made, but now our kids are trying to like figure out who they are and grow their identities through these wounds of our own.
My son's dad says all the time that, especially when my son was younger, not so much now, but you projected your abandonment issues onto him because he had a lot of separation anxiety. I mean, for 5-6 months, I don't know if you remember, Gabs, like he would scream and chase me out of daycare when he first went to daycare. I mean, it was rough. I was like leaving in tears. We went to go see a child psychologist, and he basically said, "It's all your fault." And yeah, he was like an old white man just sitting behind his computer, and I was like, we're not coming back. Even my son's dad was a little offended. He was like, like what? Just like, no. Real quick, I just wanted to jump back to, you were talking about schizophrenia being like one of the most contracted disorders. And I remember hearing that schizophrenia, and I think it had to do with like the root words, where if we look up the root of the words, I think it's something like split.
Yeah.
But anyways, that it's basically because the third eye has come online and is so advanced when the rest of the body, like, so the root specifically isn't grounded and isn't online.
Yeah.
And that kind of made sense to me, like, oh, okay, like all this is going on. And then it made me think about sometimes the things that they're saying, like they sound a little out there.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not in this work. But once you jump into the work, is it really that out there? Like, you know, or it, you know, it starts to sound a little more plausible and believable.
Yeah.
Not all of it, right?
Well,
like not the, you know, they're watching me from, you know, my candle. But some, right? I mean, the aliens and
well, and I think part of it, you know, I would have to, now I will say I haven't worked with a lot of schizophrenics because I personally, it was very triggering for me. My past partner passed away by suicide because of his symptoms. But one of the things that I do understand just from like different downloads that I've received is like, also schizophrenia can be that there are beings like attached to them and like kind of born within them, and that can also kind of be it can, and that can also be contracted in or passed down, and that's something I've recently learned in the last couple of months doing healings, is like there's two different kinds of beings. There's the kinds that chill on the outside of us and the kind that are kind of like on the inside. So
sorry, thinking... go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I mean, I'm not a mom yet, and I'll be there in a couple of years, according to every reading as of late.
Yeah, girl, they're chilling, they're waiting, they see you.
But you guys got me thinking of just like how healed you really would ideally like to be before you literally birth another soul and bring it into the dimension, and like where your womb is at, and like the ancestral healing and the types of periods you're having, because that's indicative of like your health, spiritually speaking, and physical, of course. But I'm just like,
well, and I think that it's much more of a thing now for a lot of women our age and younger, like as they become moms, this concept of being healed and working on yourself in order to be the best parent you can be. Because like for me, my spiritual awakening and my spiritual journey really didn't fully start until I was pregnant with her, because I got pregnant by surprise. So I had done none of this work, and I was not into any of this. But it really put me into it. And I think that that's something that more women are also recognizing, is just the process of growing a human and birthing it is literally magical in itself. And you are carrying the energy of two humans, and you're also becoming this portal yourself. And so it just heightens it heightens your intuition. And from that point on, to me, you're just that much more magical. Like it just turns something on. So I think, and then to me, like if you haven't started doing this work, you're going to be going through dark nights of the soul, like from having your child. And at least that's my experience. Like I just, for the next 4 or 5 years, tower moments after tower moments in the most beautiful way. It's like,
Yeah. I looked up the root words of
oh
schizophrenia,
yeah,
and it was like, well, it had like splitting of like the
yeah,
mind, body, and
yeah,
soul. So, right, I think it's just like
yeah,
all of those pieces just aren't connected.
yeah,
And that makes sense because even
yeah,
sometimes with schizophrenia, right, there's a lot
yeah,
of body movements.
yeah,
So, right, just that disconnect there, and their bodies are just doing things that they're not in control of. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to dive into like mental health on an energetic level. I'm learning so much about how to even like treat. One of my friends, good friends, and I were working on creating a protocol and a formula for actually treating personality disorders energetically, and it's really, really cool. So I'm like, I just find this stuff
That's going to
so
be
fun.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It sounds like you really enjoy the familial aspect of it, and it
hmm,
sounds like the children aspect of it especially brings you a lot of
yes,
joy. So, what have you
yes,
noticed with respect to like the anxiety that children are experiencing in the readings and
yeah,
in your counseling, as well
yeah.
as maybe like you seen that from a past life? Or even
Yeah,
just like this new age of babies that are being birthed, because I have to
I
just think with
mean,
the astrology,
The
like,
babies are like
why
different now,
yes,
right? They're like
yeah.
aren't
not the
they?
same. That's what I hear.
I
I
mean,
heard those
they're
pandemic babies are like on another level.
wild. As somebody who has a very magical child, like my daughter, first of all, she's incredibly intelligent. Like, she's astonished all of the time. Um, and these kids are so, well, okay, so let me take it. So, one of the things that I noticed from um, my readings and then paired with what I know from working with kids and in the therapeutic realm of things is like one of the big things that these kids, this generation of kids, is like their souls did not come to play. Like
Mhm.
and that's one of the big problems, right? Because like they're working through past life things. So like if they passed away in a past life or whatever past life they're trying to heal, that stuff is coming up. You know, I did a reading for somebody and their son, who he's like a perfectionist, and he's very like, these kids are very protective of their families, and that's because most of them in a past life, I'm seeing a lot of like kids in past lives who were indigenous people, or they were people who were in these different indigenous communities, who then Europeans came over and essentially destroyed their families. And so what I'm seeing a lot, and this could just be the people that are coming to me, is that there's a lot of these kids who are working through past life stuff. It's like, I need to be hyper vigilant of my family and protect them at all times, and I have to be perfect. And or also, like I have to be this way to stay safe. I read a child the other day who had this really severe witch wound, and so it was really limiting her ability to be herself, to the point where she was so anxious to go to school. Like she would be like throwing up before school, and she was like, please don't send me to school. And one of these, it was this partially this past life thing, because with the witch wound, she was persecuted for being a witch when people found out who she was. So what she does is she tries, her anxiety language is people pleaser. People pleasers try to reflect and mirror what they're seeing in the person, or what they see the person desires. But when you have too many people in one place, they can't do that, so they can't feel safe. So she was never feeling safe. But once you clear that past life and you kind of help it move it along, and you also do the physical integration steps, you're able to clear it. And a lot of times these kids have, like most kids have a past life that they're working through in the beginning, because it's like the first 0 through 15 is like them kind of working through it so it can be put to rest, so that they can go forth on their soul's mission of how they're going to serve this earth. But these kids are wild. Like even my own daughter, like I remember the one time she told me, I was feeling super crappy that day, and she was just like, Mom, before I was born, when I was still in God, she's like, I used to watch you, And you thought that like you weren't ready for me, but I knew you were ready. And I knew like you were going to be great. And like, she's like, and you're doing great. Like she told me, she's like, I watched you, you worked so hard and you just didn't think that you were ready, but you worked so hard and I knew you were ready. And so I decided to come down. And like, I remember being like, thank you for telling me that. And then sobbing, going to the bathroom and sobbing.
Aww.
Like, because I really struggled with feeling worthy to be of being a mother for the first couple of years of her life, because I'd become a mom when I wasn't ready, and like I have not been able to be the mom I always envisioned being. So it was just something like, and these kids are all very much like carrying and trying to like hear to clear ancestral stuff, and they're very warrior energy. So many of the kids I'm reading who are really struggling with anxiety are struggling with the element of play. Like their soul needs to play more, but they're struggling with coming out of this warrior energy, which brings me to play therapy, which is a form of therapy that we use for kids. And I actually think it should also be used for adults, especially adults with personality disorders, because the subconscious, which is the reptilian brain, which is our old brain, it's the one that makes the decisions. It's the one that's obsessed with our survival. It's the one that is very, very intuitive with, that's where we receive direct messages. But if we have a bunch of trauma, a bunch of crap clouding our subconscious, then it's hard for us to receive. It's hard for us to get out of certain patterns, to change our behavior, all that kind of stuff. The subconscious brain learns through storytelling and learns through play. So play, and that's how kids understand and process emotions. So my daughter might be angry with me about something, and I won't know all of the time unless I'm listening to what she's playing with her dolls. Like there are certain themes, there's certain stories they'll choose, and that's their subconscious trying to process what they've experienced and deciding on whether or not it is safe to let this go or to keep it as a storyline that we have to be aware of, or are we keeping this as this is our story, this is how we're going to experience life. So the subconscious and play and storytelling is super important for kids. So like whether it's they start creating their own stories, or you know they just need to play a little bit more, get more creative, those are really important things to help the child ground and to start to leave behind some patterns that they might be carrying from a past life.
I feel like we could
And
talk
so
about this for
I
hours.
was literally
Like,
just gonna say that, Nichole. I was like, this
We're
is
gonna-
absolutely need like another episode with you. I was like, this is the
I think
first
we're gonna have
time,
you
but
back.
not the last. Exactly.
We're definitely going to have
So-
you back. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But Nick, what were you gonna ask?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, where do you see like your business going?
Oh,
Where do you see
gosh.
yourself going in the next 5 years? Just like,
You know, you warned me about this question, and you would think that I would have prepared better for
it's a hard question.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm in this I guess this like flux period where I'm really starting to finally settle into my business, for the past year I feel like I've really struggled with it, but you know now I'm like, oh no, I see the success that's coming, I see the things that are coming. Gosh, in 5 years, okay, so I see my business really impacting things on a global level, and I also see my business having multiple different faucets. I've always been that kind of person who I have several different things going on. I can see myself doing some physical products of some capacity, whether they're baked goods, maybe I have a bakery, or it's some type of product that I've developed to help with this line of work. I do see myself also consulting, like having that formula, being able to help people treat personality disorders. I think I will always do readings and healings. I just love them so much, but I just see having lots of different faucets, but really serving on a global scale, being more well known, and really being able to share my gifts in a variety of different ways. Because I love what I do. I was telling Chelsea earlier this week, I was like, you know, with jobs that I've held, I've always had this, like, I get excited about change. I get excited about like big projects. And then after a certain period of time, the excitement wears off and I'm like bored and I'm kind of looking for the next thing, where it's very lusty. But
are
with
you a
this,
manifesting generator?
I'm a regular generator. I'm a 6'2", so I live the first 30 years of my life like a 3, trying this, trying that, seeing where I land. I've always been so surprised that I'm not a manifesting generator because I have a lot of different interests, but I think that my interests all have to do with very similar themes. What I've realized is my soul is very, very old, and so I have done a lot of these different modalities when it comes to healing and magic and all that kind of stuff in past lives. And so sometimes it feels very easy to just like, I'm going to pluck this modality up and I'm going to see how it works here. But yeah, so I see myself just serving in a lot of these different capacities. And yeah, like I see my business being very big. I was like, maybe I should go about this in a humble way, but I'm like, honestly, I just see my business being very big and being very well known. And I don't know,
Love it.
doing the things I want to do. Having more kids. I know I'm like gonna be having more kids in the next couple years.
Oh, more babies.
So yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm also like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that'll be in the next couple years. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like this, there's so many layers to it, and there is such a connection. And one of the things that we spoke about was how I just couldn't, I've said before, I don't word well. So like I couldn't put into words what you were able to say in such a simple way that was easy to understand. And I was telling Gabby, that's what I've been like trying to say, like in my mind, that's what it is. And she was able to say it. So I'm glad. Hopefully I was able to say it the same and gave you the same aha moments from before during this one. Yeah. And we had talked about it, I think towards the end of May, and I was like, oh man, like we just missed Mental Health Awareness Month. But then we had talked about it, like, no, mental health needs to be in awareness all the time, not just in May, right? It needs to be a thing always because it's so at the forefront right now. Yeah, and it does need to be talked about all the time because so many people are like, oh, I have this mental health condition, and they feel shame about it. And they're like, oh, now something is wrong with me and I'm alone and I don't have and there's no like end in sight. And that's just not true. And I just think that more and more people should talk about it and know and be aware and not feel so alone in it, because community is one of the biggest things to help with anything. It doesn't matter if you're trying to start a business or if you're trying to decrease your anxiety. A community is important. And we're going to have all of your information in the show notes as far as your socials and anything. So that way, if people want to book, if we have any parents that want to book or just interested in checking out your dance moves, we'll have your Instagram. Yes. Is there any other way that you want people to reach out to you, or is that the best way? And then they can... Yeah, Instagram's the best way. And then like once you reach out to me, I can give you my email because I'm doing scheduling through an email communication now, just because what I've learned is so many people need these customized things. So we'll email, we'll set something up, and then I send invoices out at the end of the week. So and I back to school, just because I know this is the school will start in the next couple months. Healings and parental clarity readings are great for back to school, especially if your child is a little bit anxious about school and struggling socially. So so we'll have all that information if you guys are interested in looking into that or looking into just everything that she has to offer. And you also are doing weekly community readings, so if you guys want a weekly community reading, you can check her out. I get a lot of information, so just kind of be prepared for that. As both of you have experienced my readings in different capacities, and I'm like, I get a lot. So
we love it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Yes, anytime. Thank you guys so much. I love you both.
Yes. Love you too. All right, guys, you know where to find us. All the places.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.